I don't know if you can see the disgust on my face. The Tom was already on the ground. He was down in there. I guess you can figure out what happened next. Gone. Okay, for today's tip, I'm going to talk about tracking or the blood trail after the shot. Now, if you watch the video, that last video where I shot that doe, and if you hadn't watched it, it's public land, doe down. But 3/4 of the way through that, if you want to fast forward it, I start picking up the blood trail of the doe that I'd shot. And when I got to the spot or the location where I shot the doe, I saw where she spun around, kicked up the leaves, etc. Jumped back on the trail. I didn't find any blood at the spot, and I kept looking for blood and didn't find blood till about 50 yards out. Okay, so real quick, I'm going to tell you another story, and then we'll get back to the doe. About 7 or 8 years ago, I shot a really nice 8-pointer. I was sitting in my Summit Viper, it's my climbing tree stand. Buck came through. I slid down my seat, put the forearm of my gun on the front rest or the front rail. Really nice solid rest to shoot off of. Took a deep breath, let out a little bit, slowly squeezed off the shot. I was 99.9% confident that I got him. Okay, gave him 30 minutes. I got down out of my stand and I marked where I shot him, and I watched where he ran off. Went over there where I shot, looked around, saw where he kicked up the leaves, walked 5 yards, 10 yards, but there's no blood at that spot either. There's no blood at the location where I shot that buck. 15 yards, 20, 30, 40, 50 yards, there wasn't anything. I'm thinking, I just shot this buck with a 30 caliber, rifle at, and I want to say he was probably 40 or 50 yards. He was a little closer than that doe. So I went back to where I shot him, and I put some of my gear down to mark that spot. I went back and got into my tree stand and climbed my tree stand and looked back over and just verifying that, okay, I'm not messed up or confused on where I shot that deer. Got back down of my tree stand, walked back over, got my gear, and actually put another shell in the chamber, and started easing through the woods. I figured, well, I've either wounded him or maybe I cleanly missed him. So I just started still hunting. I got on another trail and kept looking, 60 yards, 70 yards. 80 yards, and I was on a really big finger ridge. It was huge. When I got to the very edge of it, there's a slight rise. I started climbing up that rise, and I'm still haven't found one drop of blood. And I could look up the finger ridge and notice it went into like a shallow, wasn't a holler, it was just a little shallow ravine. And when I got up over that edge, when I crossed up over that incline, there's my deer. I mean, just laying right there. So I walked down to him, and he'd ran about 85, 90 yards, I guess, all total before he fell. There was one drop of blood in his right nostril. Okay, I shot him on the left side. So I rolled him over, found where I shot him in the left front shoulder. That's where I put the shot because he's quartering toward me. I'm trying to make his story fast. And flipped him back over, kept feeling down his sides, trying to find an exit wound. Obviously there wasn't one. Found a bump in his left hip. So my 30-06 bullet, it was a 150 grain bullet, one ender. He was quartered toward me with his left, went in the left front shoulder, and it lodged in the hip. No blood. There was 0 blood on the trail. There wasn't any blood laying on the ground where the deer was at. Just one drop in his nostril, so I know I hit his lungs. So just because you don't find any blood, don't get disappointed. So that's tip number 1. There's no law stating that you will find blood every time at the location that you shoot your deer or any specified distance from the location that you shot your deer. So if you're confident that you shot it, keep looking until you find it. Okay, now let's get back to the doe. Almost the same scenario. 50 yards out from where she was at, I did find blood. Now with the buck, There was zero blood. Even at the site where he fell, there was no blood except in his nostril. So at least with this case, the doe started bleeding at 50 yards. Just remember that all shots are going to be different. You're not going to have the same reaction from the deer. You're not going to have the same blood trail. And if you're confident you made that shot, like I said before, keep looking for the deer. We're going to keep talking about blood trailing and more tips in the next weeks to come, so stay tuned. I hope you like this. Don't forget to like and subscribe. We'll see you next time.